Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Glory Glory Man United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kyle Quinn. And joining me today is Phil De Bruyne from Beyond the Pitch. How's it going, Phil?
Doing good, mate. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. We got a draw for a change.
Yeah.
Uh, and Julio, you're joining us again today. Actually, it's the first time in a year. It's great to have you back.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back, mate. I just wish it was under better circumstances, to say the least.
Well, it could have been worse circumstances, only for Harry Maguire's late equaliser last night, I suppose. But that hasn't really papered over the cracks. United went 2-0 up against Porto away from home, and then just like last season in the Champions League, they collapsed in all their away games, and they did so again last night, going 3-2 down, and then Harry Maguire scoring from a corner at the end to get our second draw in the Europa League. But it has done absolutely nothing to lift the pressure on our Ten Hag. It was another chaotic performance. Uh, Phil, what did you make of last night's game?
I mean, you have about three or four different versions of United games that play out every week. The same game, same everything. And what you saw last night, nothing changes with the Maguire equaliser because the story of the game was it's the same things every single week. I mean, the first goal they concede from a simple cross, second goal, simple cross. If you remember Brighton, whenever United didn't close the ball down from the box, Maguire got heavily criticised for not dealing with it. It's the same thing. Same game every week in Europe that we watched last season. Delict getting beat to the ball twice. Bread and butter stuff. Same goal that Koeman hooked him at Holland for doing exactly the same thing. And I'm like, I have no idea why this needs to continue, but I mean, there's just there's nothing in that performance that gives you any confidence. In fact, just in my opinion, it's just another exhibit of evidence that this farce can't continue.
Yeah, it's really hard to stomach at the moment. But a few things jumped out at me last night. And the obvious one is the substitution of Rashford at half
Unbelievable.
at half time. He was easily United's best player in the first half, and he was taken off for rotational reasons, according to the manager, which has baffled absolutely everyone. I just couldn't believe it. What did you make of that substitution, Julio?
I mean, initially when he did it, I thought it must be some kind of precaution.
Yeah.
Um, I did feel for Rashford in the sense of like there was a lot of basically Delos's role at left back um, almost exposed the weaknesses with Martinez and Rashford a little bit in the sense of because there's no overlapping fullback, Rashford has to touchline hog pretty much, and he's not as effective in there. But also, like, there's a lot of space behind Rashford, so if the ball is lost, there's 60, 70 yards of just open space. And it can make Rashford look bad to an essence, but that's not on him. That's managerial instructions. That's hindering a player a little bit. In fact, two players. But I just don't. I just didn't see the need to bring arguably our best player in the first half, who was really almost looking back to his best a little bit and really proving a threat to that Porto defence. And then you've just gone into half time, you've just conceded two goals, you've just let go of the 2-0 lead you had. And in order to win the game, you decide to take off the one, arguably the only threat you had. It was just mind boggling. And it's not the first time we've seen stupid changes from Ten Hag in the past. And I think if there's if results are on the line and your job is on the line, the one thing you don't want to do is take off the difference essentially from 3 points to 1 point or even 0 points. And that's arguably what he could have done. Now I'm not saying Rashford would have been the saviour and we would have won that game if he stayed on the pitch because we were still poor defensively and as a team anyway. But there's a lot of games last season when Rashford wasn't performing and he didn't take him off because there was an obvious thought of he might win me the game. Because whether you
Yes.
like it or not, Rashford's a bit of a game changer. He's a bit of a match winner. But then in the recent weeks, he's been taking off that match winner. I just don't understand what point he's trying to make here. If he's out of form, if he's in form, I just don't see it.
Yeah, it was very bizarre because he done Rashford has had some poor games, obviously, and he's continued to pick him when he's had poor performances. But then lately, he did really well against Barnsley, and then he didn't pick him against Crystal Palace. And then last night, he has the best 45 minutes he's had probably since 2 seasons ago, where he scored the 30 goals, and he takes him off at half time. Uh, just to rest him. Apparently, that's what he says. I'm not sure I believe that or not.
I can only assume that that's not true. That what he said about rotation is not true. Because, and that's the kindest thing I can say about it. There has to have been something that happened at halftime. First of all, Ten Hag almost never makes a change at halftime unless United are getting absolutely murdered. And secondly, it makes zero sense that you would take off the one player that you need to hit form for you to have a good season. He's the only player in that front line that's proven he can score 30 goals plus a season. You've been persevering with him for a year to get him back into form. You get him back into form and you hook him. I mean, I can only assume that that is not the correct response, actual, and he just doesn't want to say that something else happened, because if that is actually true that you took him out due to rotation, I would force me to ask myself, is this guy trying to get sacked? Because I just don't understand. First of all, as Julio was saying there, your job's to win the game and right in front of you. You're on a game by game basis, so rotating for the weekend, it makes no sense to me. It just is. It's just total bullshit. There's absolutely no way that can be true. Because if it is true, that in itself is a sackable offence to me. And I've supported the guy forever, but I just every time Rashford got the ball last night against Porto, Porto players were petrified of him. He was tearing them apart, and he was keeping their right back pinned back. As soon as the second half starts, Porto break and should score immediately. They conceded 2 minutes in the first half against Spurs, 2 minutes in the second half against Spurs. They conceded 4 minutes in the second half last night, and almost conceded 1 minute into the second half last night. This just makes no sense to me. It just is total bullshit.
Yeah, he got a goal and an assist, and then he had other. He was terrifying that right back and the whole defense, as you say. He had another. He should have scored another goal, I think, but he rather than take on the shot, he decided to beat another player, and then he was crowded out. But he was United's biggest threat by a mile, and he was the last person I was expecting to be taken off at half time. But as you said earlier, Julio Ten Hag's substitutions historically have been baffling, and he's continued on that trend. Another thing I picked up on last night, and this has been a continual problem all season, really, is Dallo playing as this inverted fullback, where he basically plays most of the game in midfield, and that leaves Martinez very exposed, and the defense gets stretched. Then when you've got the right winger of the other team running at Martinez, he has to come out of position, and then United are just all over the place at the back. But then again, Delict was not winning his one-on-one duels. He was getting beat in the air for that one of the goals. I think that striker from Porto, by the way, looks like a hell of a player. Samu.
Everyone
Um,
looks like a hell of a player against United.
no, yeah, that's a fair
Well, if
point.
you're not a hell of a player, United will make you look one. Don't worry.
Yeah, so I'm getting fed up with this inverted fullback situation. I want my left back to play a left back. What's your thoughts, Julio?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm almost. I'm getting fed up of this whole inverted fullback nonsense or whatever. The way I look at it is, you're the manager. You give your players instructions for a way to play. Okay, that's fair enough. But Delo playing as a left back has not looked good anyway. And then asking him to invert, it's hurting arguably two of the best players in your team. Like, it leaves like Martinez exposed, like in the wider channels, defending loads of space. And Martinez himself has not been as normally good as we know him to be a couple of years ago. And then as for Rashford, it hinders him because, like I said before, he's got no support in fullback, and because of that, he has to be on the touchline a lot, so he's as wide as possible, where he's nowhere near as dangerous, and then he has further distance to travel, and these are happening a lot, and it's more and more Ten Hag exposing player weaknesses from poor instructions. And I think it's either he's giving these poor instructions or the players are just not understanding what he's asking for, whether it be a language barrier or whether it be he's trying different things and it's just none of it's working. Because, he wants us to be transitional, but he wants us to be possession based, and it's just poorly executed. So obviously we haven't got many other options to play at left back apart from our other right back right now. I don't really want us to see I don't really want to see Harry Mass being thrown in there, because I don't think it's fair to throw a 17-year-old kid into the deep end like that. As good as he was in pre-season, I don't think that's fair. So I don't know. I think looking ahead to the weekend, I think Ten Hag needs to maybe tweak it and adapt it, because I think as a defensive unit as well, we have not been great. This team is not solid defensively. It's not disciplined. And I just worry defending like that against Villa is going to be a really bad move, not just for a result for us of the weekend, but for Ten Hag and his job.
When you listen to what Arne Slot said after the Liverpool game about catching United's fullbacks high and leaving your forwards so that you get one-on-one with United's defenders, it's exactly the same thing that happened last night. It's exactly the same thing that happened against Spurs when United turned the ball over and Dallow's looking at Brennan Johnson and makes a decision not to track back and be ahead of the ball and be ahead of the defender or the attacker, so that what happened didn't happen. And this is why I sympathise a bit with Marcus Rashford. If Marcus Rashford's being dragged off for not doing his defensive duties on that side, then what about your fullback? Because your fullback's not doing them either. So that should certainly be where the first responsibility lies. Is that I accept that Dallow's not a left back, he's filling in there. This has been a problem for United for a long time. But clearly, there's also a tactical vulnerability with playing those fullbacks really high, and inevitably, when you need to turn the ball over in midfield, which they do quite a bit, then I don't, they clearly they're always going in danger, exposed, and you look at the Spurs game. Spurs that game should have been easily 6-7. Even the Southampton game, it didn't change until the penalty happened, and this is the thing: is that United can find a way to lose any football game because they're still so tactically vulnerable, and it's not particularly complicated to exploit it.
Another major issue is how easy the midfield is to play through. Now, he played the midfield three of Casemiro, Ericsson, and Bruno Fernandes, all in their 30s, of course. And that midfield three has not played since Bayern Munich away last season. And again, United were so open, and the defense is under pressure all the time. I understand. I accept that Delict and Martinez didn't do well, but they shouldn't be under this much pressure. Um, Ten Hag has still not solved the issue of United's midfield being too open. Julio, what's your thoughts on it?
Do you know what? The way we started this season with this 4-2-4 pressing, I liked it initially because it was something a bit more promising than what sack of shit we got served with last season, to put it lightly. But we're still conceding too many chances with it. I know that there's certain games where we haven't, but we've been worked out very quickly. I was talking in a group chat about this last night. Antonio Conte, when he went into Chelsea, he started with a 4-2-4, and we all know the story about Arsenal away. They conceded 3 goals in the first half, and then he changed the system at halftime to his back three, and then they went on and won the league that year. And one of the main reasons he changed to that back three from the 4-2-4, because he was like, right, this 4-2-4 is not working. We're conceding too many chances. We're being cut open in transition too easily, and we're not getting results. We're not winning games, and we're better than this. And I think I'm all for kind of an element of stubbornness, in the sense of you have your vision, you want to stick to that and make it work. But there comes a point where the stubbornness just becomes arrogance, and it's very clear that this isn't gonna work, because what you're doing as well is you're leaving the guy in the two in the middle, especially when it becomes the 3-1-6. You're leaving one holding midfielder on his own, and not even Prime N'Golo Kante is covering that much ground to stop the
Yeah.
transition. No one is stopping it. I mean, we brought in Ugarte for this kind of reason, and we didn't even see him last night because. And I don't think it's that much of a big deal in the sense of Ten Hag didn't want us to sign him. He would have rather have kept McTominay. That was what the
Hmm.
reports were saying. So I think it's very worrying that there's still this one holding midfielder in front of three defenders and everyone else is forward, because we're getting exposed. Everyone knows what we're going to do. And the worst part about that is this Porto team aren't that great. They changed their manager in the summer. They've been poor this season and they gave us a good game. Their striker, by the way, who looked good against us, was that striker from Atletico that Chelsea tried to buy for like 40 million
Yeah.
quid. And then Porto, I think, got him for like 15. And he I don't think he ever played for Atletico. I could be wrong on that. And he looked like, like a prime Didier Drogba at one point. Just why is our team doing this to other teams? Just making them look considerably better. Like, I think Ten Hag really needs to look at this and go, right, my job's on the line. Surely, because we've talked about he hasn't implemented his principles, he's abandoned his principles, and then whatever he's trying to work with instead, that's not working. There's got to be an element of we need to go back to basics. I need to go back to basics, but there's just no accountability for it.
No, he's just going to continue to be stubborn until he gets dismissed. That seems to be the way it's going. I thought it was bizarre that Ugarte didn't get a kick last night because he's accustomed to playing against Porto. Obviously, he played for Sporting Lisbon, and he didn't even use him last night at all. So Phil, I wanted to ask you about when it was 3-2 to Porto. Ten Hag decided to sub both his centre backs off and bring on two new centre backs, which obviously Maguire ended up scoring the winner, but that was not the reason he was brought on. He did No other manager that I know would sub the two centre backs when we're losing the game late on. What was your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, so look, I don't know if there was injuries there, if there was reasons for that. I do think, in his slight defence, that Maguire's from set pieces might have been part of the reason. You know, Maguire does give you something from set pieces, there's no doubt. If I'm being overly kind, um, so I don't know if there was injuries and what have you there, or there's reasons for that. So I can't say. It does seem odd when you need a goalie to do that, but he'd already taken his entire front line off. And so, look, at 3-2, I didn't expect United to score. And when Porto scored the first one, I knew the second one was coming and the third one was coming. I mean, there was just no doubt about it.
Hmm.
And what Julio was saying there is really important because Ten Hag is no longer managing United about implementing, his principles, and he has to manage game by game to try to win them. And so managing on the short term, it's just about doing whatever you have to do pragmatically to win the game. But you can't build a team like that because they're two different processes. This is why when someone comes in to keep you up with 6 games, they're doing a completely different job than someone that's trying to instill a playing style. I completely accept the first 2 years was impossible because of the chaos that was going on behind them, and there wasn't the football structure to have the consequences for people not complying with a manager in place, so that players didn't really have to do it because there was no consequences for not doing it. And but that's part of the problem is that you can't lead from a position of weakness. And not only do I not think the players don't trust him, I don't think they trust each other. I think that there's probably issues in there with team spirit, team morale, and how they trust each other, and whether they trust each other is good enough to pull when they go behind in games. I don't see that. And there's a big problem for any of us because any of us are going to have to create a structure that prevents this consistent entropy, the same collapse every 3 years, going from some level of optimism, improvement, and then ending up in exactly the same place. No style, no playing style. A lifeless football team that has no intention of competing. That for many teams this season, United will be their easiest fixture in the entire season. That's unacceptable. The numbers are unacceptable. And the record in Europe's unacceptable, and you have no right to be Manchester United manager after these types of results. You just don't.
Yeah, and he seems to think that he's gonna. He says, "Judge me at the end of the season." Does he really think that he's
Yeah,
gonna
but to
be
be
there?
fair to him, Ted, that's what he's being told on the inside. That confidence is coming from what's being communicated to him. If you speak to people inside United, they'll say we're looking beyond the result. Yes, the result is bad, but there's lots of other metrics that we're evaluating the management coaching team on that give us confidence. That's fine, but that needs to be explained to fans, because United fans are being asked to get patience when they don't have access to all the other things that Barada and everything has. So what are those things? Because I don't see them, and I've been watching football 40 years, and it's possible I don't know enough about football to see all the positives that someone knows more about football than me can see. But whoever, if you know more about football than me and you can see them, tell me. I want to be convinced. I want to have hope, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I certainly don't either. And yeah, it looks like the inevitable is coming at some point. It could be a Monday morning, depending on how it goes at Villa Park. Um, I, Another thing that happened last night was back-to-back red cards now for Bruno Fernandes. Obviously, the one against Spurs was harsh, and that was rescinded by the FA. But on a yellow last night, I don't think he should be going in with a high foot in Europe, because in Europe they card you for that. We all remember what happened with Nani against Real Madrid. So you do not go challenge with your foot that high. So that was irresponsible of Bruno Fernandes. He obviously didn't make contact with the player's face. He was rolling around holding his face like Rivaldo, but he didn't make contact with that with his head at all. So that was obviously fake an injury. But nevertheless, he shouldn't have had his foot that high, and he wasn't. He was second favorite to win that ball. He should have went with his head, or just left it. But he will now be suspended for the Fenerbahce game, I presume. So, what did you make of the red card then, Julio?
To be honest with you, I think when you're on a yellow and you're going anywhere with your foot that high, I think you're asking for trouble. To be honest, I don't like the sending off, because obviously there is a small element of injustice about it because he didn't actually touch the player. But you're on a yellow, you're going for a ball that realistically, even if you've got to, it's not going in. You're not touching that in or anything. Do you know what I mean? It was less than half a chance, and sticking your foot that high for it, I think it's unrealistic to do that expecting for it to go in. I think you're just asking for trouble, whether it's with the centre back or another player or even the goalkeeper. So I think it was a little bit stupid, but there's not really much else to say about it, to be honest. It's very difficult to really say anything apart from shouldn't have done it. I know the player made a meal of it, but he was already on a yellow. He was asking for trouble, and now we're without a player for the next game.
Listen, I want to say something. You see, on Sunday, the reason why Bruno Fernandes was sent off was because he lifted his foot high. Now it wasn't a red card, but once he lifted his foot high and in a natural position, then you are taking a risk, because you can get sent off for very little. Got it rescinded, which is rare. So he should have been mindful of that going into the game this week, last night. Bear in mind, it was 1-0 when he gets sent off against Spurs. It's 3-2 when he gets sent off against Porto. And I'll tell you something, when I saw him getting sent off against Spurs, he didn't look like a player that felt an enormous sense of injustice. It looked like a player that was happy to take a way out. Because I've seen Bruno Fernandes throw petulant fits on the pitch over misplaced passes, over silly decisions, throw-ins going the wrong way. Take a look at his reaction on Sunday whenever he's getting sent off. It's a half-hearted appeal, and then, like you say, Julio, the other night, last night, ball comes in. You know not to go away high foot, even if you connect with the ball. and the player heads it, you're in trouble. So you're a captain. There's 10 minutes to go. It's in your home country against fans that are giving you all sorts of shit. United need you now more than ever, and you go and do something stupid like that. Like to me, that was very similar to the incident against Spurs, where I felt like, is this guy looking for a way out? I understand he's frustrated, he's not playing well, but that's unforgivable. I mean, that is unforgivable, and that is something he should be heavily criticised for because you need to have had petulant captains before that have get sent off. That's fine. But it's one thing getting sent off when you're competing. It's another thing getting sent off when you're petulant and juvenile and looking for me like a way out of the game, and being really frustrated. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that was, and to be honest, United played better on Sunday after he was sent off, and they played better last night after he was sent off. And I love him. I think he's a magnificent player, but he's the captain of his football club, and he's as responsible as anyone for the mess United are in. He got his big bumper new contract. I would like to see him. I don't want to see you apologize on TV or do your interview. I don't care about that. You apologize for your behaviour on the field, and he let United down and let United fans down.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing that in both games United looked better with 10 men and without Bruno Fernandes. Yeah, it's unbelievable that, and when he's the captain of the football club. Um, uh, just on that, Phil, do you think Harry Maguire is a better leader than Bruno Fernandes?
I don't think either of them are particularly good leaders. I'll be honest. I don't. I think Maguire plays better without that responsibility of being the captain and having that focus put on him when United are not playing well and being unfairly singled out. I mean, I'll be honest. From what I've seen at Elector Maguire, I haven't seen anything yet from Delict that would make me say he's a better player than Maguire. I hope that he is. I hope he becomes that, but I'm not convinced by it yet. I haven't seen enough from him to say he definitely should be starting over Maguire. Um, and I know Maguire got criticised for what happened to Brighton, but I actually felt Lissandro Martinez was more at fault for that goal because when that ball comes back across the box, Lissandro Martinez is the only one that can see well back in front of him and decides not to get in front of him and get the ball.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. That's the thing is that there aren't many leaders in there that you would pick.
no, there's not. Even last night, I think it was the first Porto goal. Onana makes a save, and then Martinez is not alert for the rebound, and
Yeah,
the striker gets in ahead of him and heads it down and in, and Martinez is too slow to react. Uh, yeah, Maguire is, I feel, has played better without the captaincy.
yeah.
And I think Bruno Fernandes is now suffering from being the captain as well. It seems to be a bit of a curse, really, at the moment. Um, n- Neither of them would be the long-term captain for me, so it'll be interesting to see who the next one will be. And if we do appoint a new coach, will he keep Bruno as the captain next
Well,
season,
here's,
or
here's the thing, Kyle, quickly on that. If Gary Neville said this on the overlap last week, and it's been said many times before, when Ferguson was manager, Ferguson had multiple managers on the pitch. Before you got to Ferguson, if you fell short of standards, you got their arse chewed on the field by a number of leaders in that United team. Take a look at when United concede a goal. Nobody says a word to anybody. They just throw their hands in the air and walk back to the centre circle. No demands, no ball tunes. Even Dallo doesn't get a ball tune for what he did on Sunday. And to be fair, part of that is a consequence of the fact that the players don't believe they can be successful. So you're not going to get leadership towards a collective goal when they don't believe they can accomplish it. And this is something that United have a problem with because to me, most of the issues I see at United on the field are a consequence of cycle. I mean, I don't think they execute Ten Hag's tactics with any vigor, but I also think it's very psychological, and I don't think that can be fixed without. I mean, I just don't think they trust Ten Hag or they trust each other yet.
yeah, absolutely. Another thing I hated about last night was Anthony coming on. There's no situation that calls for Anthony anymore, in my opinion, and he didn't make any difference whatsoever, rather predictably. But there were positives last night. I know there's not. it's hard really to see any positives at the moment, given the form that United are in, and we look as if we're heading towards the manager being sacked. But there were slight positives, and there are slight positives this season. With the form of Onana is good, I feel. Um, Christian Eriksen has been in great form, 2 assists again last night, and his corners are excellent. This is why we're scoring from corners, because Ericsson can take a brilliant corner, and Maguire and Delict can attack the ball. And Rashford obviously seems to be getting back to form, albeit he seems to get punished anytime he plays well under Ten Hag. So those are the slight positives, aren't they, Julio?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it looks like we're trying to clutch at straws to look for any positives right now, to be honest. I mean, it's nice to see one or two players doing well, but we're still losing on the pitch. We're not doing that well as a team. But no, you're right. I think with Ineos coming in, this new board coming in, it was always going to be about everyone needed a good 6 weeks, pretty much, for anyone, whether you're Marcus Rashford, whether you're the manager, whether you're any new signing, like Onana was signed not the summer just gone, the year before. It was this season was is a big indication for them to look at and go, right, he won't be here long term. Like, you cannot sit here and tell me Mason Mount will be here in 2 years' time with this injury record. Say you can say the same for the likes of Shaw, maybe as well. I say maybe, probably, definitely. So it was imperative that we see the best of our players, and it's nice to see obviously Ericsson come in and look quite good as well. Because there was talks in the summer that maybe he might be let go, get some wages and a few million quid for him. I do agree with what was said about Maguire. Looks like he's playing a lot better without the captaincy. I just think that kind of pressure is a huge weight off his shoulders, and now he seems to be playing okay. Because Harry Maguire is one of those players where when he's good, he's really good, and we love what we're seeing. But when it's bad, it becomes almost comically bad. Sometimes it's not his fault. Sometimes it's just really can be on him. We all saw some of the poor defensive mistakes from a couple of years ago. But yeah, I just think that it's good to see what players are turning up and what aren't. Like Onana, I think needed a big season because there's still a lot of people on the fence with him. Even now, where they're still thinking maybe get rid of him and bring in Diogo Costa, who after last night, I don't know if those people are saying the same things. This was a goalkeeper for them that was there for the taking. But yeah, I think the key players like Rashford as well, starting the season really well. I think it's big going forward, and if there is this rebuild, if that's the word they want to use, it can give the board a good idea of who can stay and who can leave, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon here in the comments says it's a work in progress. Um, for there to be a progress, there needs to be a step two. We've been stuck on step one for quite a while now. And Ten Hag mentioned, he said it's a process last night again, which is one of his favourite phrases. And I don't see, we haven't moved into step two yet. And if we don't very, very soon, then Ten Hag is going to be dismissed. So, Phil, just looking ahead to Aston Villa, do you think Maguire should replace Delict in the starting 11?
I mean, if you're picking that team on form, yes, I do. I mean, I think Delict was at fault for maybe one or two of the goals last night, at least. And I think that he's poor on the header. He should get there first. And I think he's poor on the third goal. Again, gets beaten to the ball first. I mean, to me, I don't understand how a defender constantly gets beaten to the ball. I mean, when you hear what Christian Eriksen says that 20 wanted it more, and that's what I see, and that's to me is the biggest indictment is that these players aren't that fussed about losing, and have accepted that's part of their identity now. Some people are offended about losing, and if they lose once, it provokes a response, not a reaction. Reaction's all emotional, a response, and they fix the mistakes. But United conceded a goal against Spurs after 2 minutes that they conceded against 20 that never should have happened at this level, and it just seems to me like they've accepted losing is okay, defeat is okay. And so when I go to Villa, I think under just the meekest of pressure, United will collapse and they'll have a body language after 10, 15 minutes if they concede where, well, yeah, of course we're going to lose. So, I mean, to me, yes, Maguire should start, but I mean, how can anyone go into this game expecting anything other than what we've been watching for months? I mean, there's just anything else would be a surprise.
Yeah, United have been described by some people as Aston Villa's bogey team because we unexpectedly done the double over them last season. But this is Aston Villa are just coming off the back of beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League. The confidence will be high. The crowd will be well up for it. They'll be looking for back-to-back wins against big name opponents. And United obviously have been just more of the same from last season in terms of their performances. And the manager seems like he's one defeat away from the sack. So it's difficult to see anything other than Aston Villa winning this game comfortably. And as you say, if Villa score early, the heads will go down and United will collapse. Probably be another sending off, and
Exactly.
Villa will win 3 or 4-0. So in that circumstance, Julio, do you think Ten Hag will be dismissed on Monday morning?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be fine until the 65th minute when John Duran comes on inevitably. Um, and then I think he'll score the goal that would put the final nail in the coffin. I mean, I've been saying my theory was because of the investment, not just in the playing staff, but the coaching staff, I thought he'd get beyond October and in that November, December period when this tough run that's here, when it's over the line and past, then they would, relieve him of his duties potentially if it continued, and then whoever comes in as an interim or even a new permanent appointment would have an easy run of games to get things back on track. But as each game goes by, I mean, on the one hand, you could look at the previous fixtures and go, well, everything was okay when we beat Barnsley, Southampton, etc. But then obviously when you get performances that like so dejected like Liverpool and like Spurs, and then obviously last night's game, and then Villa on Sunday, who have got everything going for them right now. It's looking quite worrying. I think there is a high possibility he could go on Monday, but I don't know. It's one of those things where he could easily go on Monday. Like we saw the reports about Jose leaving in October, and then they beat Newcastle 3-2, and then he was still there 2 months later, and then he was sacked. So it could well be a case where they sit down, have a discussion, and go, right, let's clear this tough run of fixtures, and then maybe if it's still as bad, then we'll relieve him of his duties.
Phil, do you agree? Do you think he'll be dismissed on Monday morning if United lose?
It's very difficult to predict anything with United right now because they're doing things completely differently. Certainly, if it had been Woodward, he would have been sacked already. Woodward would always react to the result, to the superficial thing, sack a manager, bring a new one in without really evaluating why the manager failed, because that would incriminate, him. And so it's easier just to make the change. I think that Ineos have to be really careful because right now, if they sacked him, they could divorce themselves from his failure and say, like, we didn't hire him, we gave him a chance. But the longer they persevere with him, then the more culpable they become for that failure. And if I'm Ineos, if I'm someone on that board and I'm being asked in a board meeting, do I want to stake my reputation on Ten Hag, a guy I never hired? You would have to have enormous courage to say yes, because if you say yes and he fails, which is the most likeliest thing, and it's hard to see anything else, then you're, culpable. And so for me, it's about Ineos needing to be, even if they don't want to be confronted with this reality, it's staring them in the face that, how much longer can you let this go on? Because to me, you could even say nothing that happened in the first 2 years is his fault. But the question is, would you hire him right now if he was on the market as a Manchester United manager, even if the first 2 years didn't happen? And I don't think that answer is yes. So for me, um, I would hope that that is the case, but I can't say anything with certainty anymore because the process is completely different.
Yeah, what Laurie Whitwell of the Athletic is saying is that they're not necessarily going to sack Ten Hag if we lose to Villa.
Well,
That
that's what I was saying earlier. That's what he's being told on the inside.
yeah,
But
so
that's always, but any of us are not going to leak that stuff the way it was in the past. That yes, we're thinking about sacking. I mean, they're not going to tell you until they tell you. So the people, it's not like it was before. You could ask United stuff before, and they would give you an idea of what they're going to do. But now you're not going to get that indication from the inside, so you won't know until you know.
and it's worth mentioning that Umar Barada and Don Ashworth were not at the club when the decision was made to keep Ten Hag. So that might be significant because Jim Radcliffe was interviewed today, I believe, and he basically passed the buck and said it's not my decision. The decision will be made by the football people, namely Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth. So he's saying, well, I refuse to believe that he won't have some kind of say in it. I'm sure he'll be the one who signs it off. Um, but uh, it is worth remembering that them two did not make were not part of the decision making process uh, to keep Ten Hag back in June. Um, they
They
probably
would have been
wanted,
part of the decision making process, but you're right. Yeah, they didn't do it, but they definitely would have been consulted on it. But yes,
yeah. So tomorrow, or sorry, Sunday, it is going to be an immensely difficult game for United. It's hard to see United beating anybody at the moment. Never mind one of the top teams in the Premier League. So it's looking pretty depressing, really, to be honest. And it looks like it's inevitable that Ten Hag is going to be dismissed at some point, even if he survives a defeat at Villa Park. I just think in November, in late October, November, at some point, it's going to happen. If you remember, Ollie got a stay of execution as well, and so did Mourinho, as Julio mentioned. I just think Ten Hag is just not going to turn this around. I think the second is coming in the next few weeks. Um, but the question is, what comes next? Um, and obviously, we've been told that Thomas Tuchel turned the job down in the summer because he didn't get enough power or control in terms of transfers. He was only just going to be a coach. Uh, and is it significant, Phil, though, that Jim Radcliffe is coming to the Aston Villa game? Is this like the owner coming to see the evidence in
nah,
person
I don't
before?
think so. Nah, I mean, Jim Ratcliffe's going to sign off on a decision, but won't make the decision. I mean, there's no need to be there to know exactly what you need to be done. Um, And like the only person that didn't get a stay of execution in the last 13 years was David Moyes. He was sacked in his first season because he was sacked by the people that didn't hire him. And that's where Ten Hag finds himself in. You know, every other manager after that worked for the person that was hired, that worked for the person that hired them, so they got a bit longer. Ten Hag's in that position where he's now working for the people that hired him. And, you know, the reality is United can't financially afford to write off this season. I mean, they need
No.
to be close to the top. They need to be in that top four, and if they lose on Sunday, there'll be 9 points off Villa. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable in October, and that should get you the sack at any time being a Manchester United manager. But in your third season, you simply cannot stand in front of Manchester United fans and say, "Give me more time." No manager in world football gets that time. I mean, Barcelona are a total mess off the field. You can't register players financially in a total mess, and yet somehow they're able to win La Liga. Somehow, Hansi Flick's got them playing well in the Champions League, and somehow they're able to overcome all the things that United can't. So to me, it's like no. I don't even understand. That won't make a difference if Ratcliffe's there or not. That he'll just sign off on the decision.
Yeah, and Chelsea have been a basket case as well, and look how well they're doing under their new manager. So, yeah, Ten Hag is definitely walking a thin line at the moment. Just been no sign of progress at all from last season in these opening games. In fact, it's just more of the same, really. Um, Now, this just new in here from Adam Crafton of the Athletic. He says Man United executive committee are to meet in London on Tuesday within 48 hours of the Villa game as scrutiny grows on Ten Hag. A previously scheduled meeting, Joel Glazer is flying in as well, and not knowing if the first team performance on the agenda. So there's going to be an executive meeting 48 hours after the Villa game, and Joel Glazer is flying in to be a part of that. What's your thoughts on that, Julio?
I think, to be honest with you, I think that would have been a report without the whole within 48 hours of Aston Villa game, scrutiny grows on the manager because it says scheduled meeting. I think it might. It's very easy to sit here and to say that, listen, this is the sacking talks. Mourinho was gone on a Tuesday. Moyes was gone on a Tuesday. This whole thing. But I just think that this will be takeover related, if anything. We've got an international break coming up, so this will almost be like a quarterly review, almost.
Yeah.
And I think that's all it will be. I mean, it could end up being a case where they turn around and go, "Oh, and gentlemen, whilst we're here, let's discuss them." But I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
Joe Glazer doesn't have anything to do with the sporting side anymore. Obviously, there's a financial side if you're going to sack Ten Hag, but if they're going to sack Ten Hag, they'll not need Joe Glazer there. But so I agree with Julio there about that.
yeah, but it could end up being an item on the agenda, at the bottom of the agenda, but given that the situation with the manager being under so much pressure. But yeah, Phil, as you say, Ineos are going to make the decision on the manager, and it's not going to have anything to do with Joe Glazer, really. But how much is it going to cost, Phil, to sack Ten Hag? That's a big question. That might.
Yeah, so this is the question because a lot of people talk about his contract renewal, but that contract renewal was never signed. So he's still actually working on his old contract. So so it was discussed but never completed, which tells you a lot. So it's not clear because the new contract that Ineos wanted him to sign had clauses in it that they could sack him with little compensation if he wasn't meeting incremental goals. Um, so he has 1 year left on his contract. So all this talk about 14.7 million, I would be very surprised if it's that high. And you know, when you consider there's a price of getting rid of him and there's a cost of keeping him, and to me, if he's failing, the cost to keep him is massive. And so I think that yeah, there's obviously going to be a payoff there, but I don't think it'll be as high as people think because I think if he does go, you're not talking about getting rid of all the backroom staff too. I think they will stay. I think it's telling that a number of the backroom staff that came in this summer have no specific ties to Ten Hag. I mean, I know Van Nistelrooy obviously does have specific ties to attachment to Ten Hag, but beyond that, he's also a United legend, and I don't think the set piece coaches and all that would go. So I don't think it'll be that high.
So, do you think that Van Nistelrooy will be made the caretaker manager if Ten Hag is dismissed, or will we try and bring in a permanent manager right away?
I asked Khalil that first.
Yeah, Julia, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't think they sack Ten Hag without an immediate plan. I think
Yeah.
that only comes down to who they can get. I don't see them like obviously Inzaghi is a name that's been linked. I don't see them getting him out of Inter mid-season. I think he'd be an end of the season appointment. So it really comes down to whether they get someone who's a free agent like Thomas Tuchel, if they can go back in for those talks and see if they can come to some form of agreement, or because it is crucial they get this appointment correct, this next permanent manager appointment correct. It's big for them. It was very easy for them to keep Ten Hag because everyone they spoke to, they either didn't like the look of by the end of the talks or they couldn't agree terms, like in Tuchel's case. because Barada and Ashworth weren't in house, whether you want to talk about whether they had an input legally, illegally, whatever, it was easier for them to just keep him, and then when the men are in house, then they make that decision properly as time goes on. Because and then they backed him in the summer, and obviously he hasn't delivered. So it's, I think personally, I don't think they'd get Tuchel. I like Thomas Tuchel personally, but I don't think he'd break his stance on whatever the terms would have been. I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong. Maybe I hope to be proven wrong in that regard if there's some kind of negotiation. But I think there's more of a chance Rude becomes interim and then a new permanent signing, a new permanent manager, sorry, from next summer onwards, than someone coming in straight away now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Rude was partially brought in to be a plan B if things go wrong, but they probably didn't think it would go wrong this quickly. So Rude will end up being interim manager if he was to come in on Tuesday morning. Let's say he's going to end up being interim manager, for was it
Well,
maybe 8 months?
there's another
That's
part of this, Kyle. Does Ruth Van Nistelrooy deserve to be separated from the mess that's going on this season? I mean, maybe the players right now think that he's part of the problem. You remember when he was at PSV, he had issues with players going to the board saying that they had problems with him man management. They had problems with how he his coaching sessions and stuff. He had a very similar issues of what Ten Hag has had. And obviously, people, he's a United legend. He's had coaching experience at PSV, but he felt that he should have more time as a number two. Um, so for me, it's like Van Nistelrooy is the obvious choice because it's easy, but we don't know how much the players see him as an extension of the problem, and whether it's you can just go to Ruud van Nistelrooy because that's going to be an issue, and I think it's hard to do that. I think it's hard to when you're brought in as a number two to go to a number one, and it has to be done quickly because I think that does Van Nistelrooy not deserve to have? Because if United were playing really, really well this season and flying, Van Nistelrooy would be getting plenty of credit about being fundamental to that turnaround. So does he deserve to not be stained by what's going on? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think he has the credentials to be United manager for an extended period of time. Uh, I don't want to be in a situation where look at the abuse that Ollie took in those 3 years from certain fans. I wouldn't want Ruud van Nistelrooy to be in that position as well if results don't go well.
No, he has to take
So,
that. Whoever comes United manager has to take that. That's part of the game. No, if you
but
want to be no,
oh
don't take
yeah,
it.
yeah, I know, but I don't like to see a legend being treated that way.
Oh, no one
Um,
does. That's the way we're at. Where we're at though, and so if that's going to put you off these United, you don't just be elected to be counted on. Never take the job. That's fine. But the same token, Kyle, if someone comes in there and wins the league with United, they are going to be consecrated. They're going to have a statue put outside Old Trafford, and they're going to be they have to look at that from the opposite perspective and say, I'm the person to turn this club around, not the person that's going to get abused in 2 years.
yeah, and I agree with what Julio was saying there about Simone Inzaghi. He would be my preference, as anyone who listens to this show will know. But we probably won't get him, mid-season. We'd have to pay, you know, well over 20 million, close to 30 million probably, to sack Ten Hag and then bring in a coach who's at another club currently. So I don't know if any of us going to be willing to pay those sums, especially with the PSR and all that. So probably it will be Van Nistelrooy for a while, and then they'll get the permanent manager sorted in the meantime, because obviously there'll be more managers available at the end of the season. Yeah, so Inzaghi would be my choice. Uh, I'd love to get him right now, but that looks difficult. So Phil, who would you choose as your permanent manager next? I'm assuming it's not Van Nistelrooy.
Look, I think that United needs someone to come in there that has a track record that demands trust that right away. I think the problem when you go with people like Graham Potter or people like of that ilk that don't have a track record that gets players respect right away. One, that's very hard to do, and two, I don't think United's structure is strong enough yet behind a coach to really support them. I think you have that structure that's in place in other clubs that have been in place for years, that have ironed out other kinks and is working at optimal levels. United aren't there yet. So I think they still need that's why I would have an issue with Southgate. I think they need someone that comes in there who gets trust right away with their methods because it's delivered success in the game. So you need someone that isn't afraid of that pressure, that players respect, and that you don't have to. If they hit a bad patch, their track record gets them through. I mean, if Graham Potter hits a bad patch, people will abandon him right away because there's no track record that says you should trust what I'm doing. And this is a problem when you're Ten Hag coming from Ajax to United. You get some credibility and equity for what you've done in Holland, but there's a trend that follows Ten Hag. You go back to that Spurs game where Ajax get knocked out late, and then you look at what happened, how many times you need to throw games away late. It's a trend that follows them everywhere, and I just think when you pick up managers from the Dutch league and what have you, getting that credibility is hard. And you have to have a football club and a structure that's really set up to make it hard to feel that, Arne Slot benefited from that at Liverpool. At United, it's still too chaotic, and for a coach to have his methods implemented 100%, it has to be completely supported by the board. Otherwise, you're just like a step parent coming into a relationship trying to impose discipline on kids when the other parent won't impose them. You have no chance. So I think it has to be someone that gets that respect right away.
Yes, Zayad in the comments wasn't pleased with you mentioned Southgate's name there, Phil. It gives,
Yeah,
yeah,
I shouldn't be anyone from United, man. No.
yeah, definitely not. I'm not even considering him anymore. What we've been told by Larry Whitwell is that Southgate is not on the list anymore. United are not considering appointing him manager, which will come as a relief to every Manchester United fan right now. Um, so it's just looking pretty depressing. We're hoping that we will get the new manager bounce at least in the coming days or after the national break. I think Brentford is our first game after that. And hopefully there's a new man. We get a bounce from that. But it's about finding that long term manager that's going to bring us back to the promised land of winning leagues and Champions Leagues again. And like we've talked about many times, Phil, you've talked about it and I've talked about it. Um, United, only two United managers have won the league since the First World War. That's how rare it is for someone to succeed at Manchester United. We need to find that. Um, and only three managers have won the title at United, and the first one was before the World War, which is crazy, and only two since then. So we need to find that fourth guy that's going to win the title at United and win our 21st title. And it's not obvious who that's going to be. And Omar Barada has said he wants to win the title on the 150th anniversary of United's formation in 2028. It's looking like an uphill task right now, Julio, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think it's unreasonable. If a new manager comes in the summer, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect title challenging form
Yeah,
in the third season. Because
yeah,
I think
I agree.
I look at Liverpool and Arsenal when they got Arteta and Klopp, and half season aside, in their third season, both of them were challenging for leagues. Arteta obviously was top for 93% of the season and bottled it, and then Klopp and Liverpool were at John Stones' clearance off the line away from winning the league, but they won the Champions League that year as well. And if they get it right, I mean, this team is not, when you look at the squad of players, it's not as bad as it looks. I agree with Phil in the sense of it needs to be someone who can walk into a big club and understand the expectations of a big club. But even away from that, I gave you three pillars of Man United, which was giving youth a chance, winning, and doing it whilst playing good football. There aren't really any candidates there that United could get that would get you all three. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of pretty football and youth a chance, for example, in a Graham Potter, for instance, but you're not going to win anything, so you might as well go support a Brighton or a Bournemouth or someone like that. You just don't win. Then you've got your Allegri's and your not Tuchel's, but like serial winners who would walk in, win trophies, but it could be maybe not playing good football, and maybe youth might not be given a chance. And then you've got Tuchel, who football is great to begin with, will win you cups, will get you up there challenging, might not win the league, and after a few years, when it starts to go downhill, won't be able to pick it back up again, and then the players just fall out of love a little bit. It's quite historical for Tuchel, so it's very difficult to pinpoint a candidate. There are candidates I like I do like Inzaghi, I do like Tuchel, because I've seen Tuchel at different clubs do different things and play different styles, and tries to play to the strengths of the players he's got. Like we saw it at Chelsea, he went into a team that was defensively ill-disciplined and moved them to a back five, and it was perfect for the personnel that they had, and they did look good for a substantial amount of time, but then it fell away very quickly and it just got very stale. So it is imperative they get this next appointment right. I think, league title by 2028 is not beyond the realms of possibility, even with what's there right now. It just needs the right coach to go in, or the right manager, depending on how you want to look at it. But it needs to be someone who knows what it takes to manage a big club, because there's expectation there, and then there's respect of any player you sign. Any player that's there now, there's an expectation at Man United, and it needs to be someone who knows. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say Ancelotti's the perfect candidate, because he is a little bit, wins trophies, plays good football, and no matter what's given to him, he'll just get on with it. But I don't see unless Ancelotti wins the treble this year for Real Madrid and leaves because he's got nothing to prove. I just do not see that happening. So it's very difficult to pinpoint one or two people who fit all of those different criteria.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see Ancelotti rocking up at Old Trafford as things stand, but you never know. Zayed says Jim Radcliffe, being 71 years old, you can see why he wants Thomas Tuchel for a quick fix, quick success. Phil, do you think there's a possibility they could approach Tuchel again and might he change his mind?
Well, I think it's interesting that Tuchel didn't want the job based on some of the conditions, and Ten Hag couldn't agree a contract based on some of the conditions. So it all depends on what any of us want. With Tuchel, one of the big issues is he hasn't spent more than 2 years in any of his last 5 jobs. It's Dortmund, PSG, wherever he's been, Chelsea, he Bayern, he's 2-year manager, and so. And I don't know if he's a serial winner. He didn't deliver the Champions League at PSG. He had some bumpy times at Dortmund, and he did deliver the Champions League at Chelsea, but it sort of finished badly, and he wasn't able to win the league with Bayern, which is quite unbelievable, really. So
He did in this.
Well, not as last season. I'm talking about
last season,
Leverkusen won it. Yes, it's Leverkusen won it last season. So you're looking at that going, it's not like it's a Guardiola situation where you're guaranteed winning, because it's not that way. And you should be winning the league. I mean, even if you look at the league that he did win with Bayern, they won it by a goal, and it was on the last day of the season, and Dortmund really threw it away. So I think the season before that they won it by double-digit points. So they won it 10 years in a row. It's not really an accomplishment. It's always the failure, and the people that appointed him got sacked. Khan and forget what the other guy was. So I don't know if he's that guarantee that will bring you success. And look, what I will say is, Omar Barada is the first person that United have had, maybe ever, but certainly in recent in contemporary history that's actually come out and said something like that, that they want to win football, they want to win the league within 2 to 3 years. Because you can't have players and a manager at a football club whose ambition outstrips the football club. You know, United might want to finish top four, but when you're bringing in players like Cristiano Ronaldo, you have to wait trying to win the league, or they're going to become a pain in the arse about the place. It's so for me, it's about making sure that the ambition of the football club matches the players, and everything they're doing is geared towards that. The only definition of success is football success, not financial, and incentivize everyone towards that goal. So certainly they could approach Tuchel again, but I think that there's also major risks with that. That it's still a short-term project.
Yeah, Tuchel wouldn't be my choice. There are definite issues with him. He's had quite a mixed record. Yes, he's won the Champions League at Chelsea, but that PSG, obviously nobody's won the Champions League with PSG, I suppose. But at Bayern, he won the league by a goal, as you say, on the last day of the season, and then l- finished third in his second season at Bayern. With Leverkusen and Stuttgart finishing ahead of them, so that's not great for a Bayern Munich manager. So, and yeah, he does tend to do well at the start, and then it kind of falls away, and things go a bit sour. He's a bit like Mourinho in that aspect, except he hasn't won as many trophies as Mourinho. So you could say he's a wee bit of a poor man's Mourinho. And I definitely remember having a Chelsea fan on this show complaining about the style of football from Tuchel as well. And United fans do like to play entertaining football, and if it isn't entertaining, there would definitely be some complaining about that. We've seen that with Van Gaal and Mourinho, that the football was too boring. So there's no obvious candidate, obviously. But Ineos, as you said, Julio, absolutely have to get this next appointment right. But we've said that quite a few times over the years, and they haven't got the appointments right, albeit the caveat that there was no football structure until this year. So it's hard to know what direction they're going to go in. Zayad says there's going to be any wild cards like the Bournemouth manager or Marco Silva, who's been mentioned in recent days. I'm not sure who wrote that story. Julia, what do you think about that?
I think Marco Silva was brought up in the summer as someone they actually spoke to. I think it was the Athletic who wrote that they spoke to him before the FA Cup final, and it didn't go anything from that. I mean, to be honest with you, like I like Iraola, but I think in terms of I've looked at his career and I looked at where he's got to, and I do like the jobs he's done. But I just think Bournemouth to United is too big of a jump. No matter
Yeah,
how good the football is, unless it's like unless there was like a prime Mourinho 0405, for instance, or another prime Klopp, there isn't an obvious candidate. I mean, it looks. I think with the way they're trying, I have a feeling they're going to do where they look for a manager who can sustain success for 3 to 5 years as a bit of a project, in the sense of similar to what Klopp did at Liverpool, where within 3 or 4 years he's built a team, he's got them winning, and then he can make it last the distance, if you know what I mean, in terms of multiple years. But not a lot of managers can do that. I would love us to. I'd love to see something where it's similar kind of to what Man City did when they got the money. They obviously sacked Mark Hughes after a year, and then what they did was they brought in Mancini, someone who a bit more pragmatic but knew how to win leagues and cups. Obviously, did it at Inter, which whether you want to look at it or not, and he couldn't do it in Europe for them. He won them an FA Cup and a league title inside 2 full years. The third year had them challenging on both of those. Got grouped in Europe, and then he was sacked. And then they brought in, but they built a really good team who knew how to win now. And then you bring in Pellegrini, who plays a bit of a different, more attacking style, and evolves that team into someone who can win a league and a cup and a couple of cups, playing more attacking football. And it's the perfect kind of stopgap between the Italian pragmatism of Mancini to Pep and his philosophy. And in that squad that was built over time, and in the players that came in and out with different philosophies, there was a thought process, even when Pellegrini was there, in who they signed players that would fit for Pep's system years in advance. Now I'm not expecting that level of, you know, preparation for a manager and in terms of squad building, but an idea like that where they go for a philosophy, they start with something, build a team that can win, and then evolve the style within that team, within that squad. Because that manager could leave, who's won them their first league for years, and then, but 3, 4 years down the line, they have won another league playing a different style, but the bulk of that core is still there. Like Man City had with Joe Hart, Company, Yaya Toure, David Silva, Aguero. They were still there when Pep came in, which is 2 managers later. So I would be intrigued to see something like that implemented. I don't know who they would bring in as the first guy. You know, I've, I know someone who suggested we go all out Italian as our approach. So we get Allegri in now, and then after him comes, I don't know, Conte, for example, and then after him comes Inzaghi and then Motta. So at 15 years, you've got Italian football that's evolved in different managers. I'm not saying that's the answer, but there's all sorts of different routes they could go down. But at the top and bottom of it, whatever I like is probably not going to be there. It's probably going to be someone who's going to come in now for 5 years. Like, I think Nagelsmann's a name they really like, and I think he would be a good candidate if he hadn't signed on for the Germany job permanently for more time until I think the next World Cup. But that kind of, he can be here for 5 years. He's young enough to be here. He's won a league. He's won a league before. He knows how to challenge. He can build a good team, etc., etc. Plays good football. Knows how to work with young players as well. So I think they'll go down more that route as opposed to the routes I've suggested.
Yeah, but he has indicated that he's not interested in the United job. He's fully focused on Germany, and that World Cup isn't for another couple of years. So, but given how young he is, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being United manager at some point. But what we're hoping for is that the next guy who comes in is going to be there for 5 to 7 years, and he's going to win at least everything once, and be the United's version of Jurgen Klopp. That's what we're hoping for. We're hoping that it's not going to be a few managers down the line, that the next one is going to be that guy. But I mean, we've been saying that for 10 years now. Um, so Phil, do you have a preference, Phil, on who you would like to take a risk on?
I just want it to be a result of a comprehensive process, not a top-down process where it's okay. He's a bit good, he will do. I want it to be a comprehensive process that says this is what we want. I mean, if you go back to what Ranić was saying, you identify the guy you want, and everything is derivative of that particular style that individual is successful at. So to me, it's about same with the signings. The process, identity has to identify the signings, not an agent calling saying, "Here do you want my client?" And so this is where we find out the quality of the people that run the football department, because this is what they're paid for, and this is supposed to be where they show the differential between what we had before and what we have now. Is that they're supposed to know what the answer to this question is, and if they haven't been thinking about this question really since the summer, then they would be derelict in their duty, because the potential of Ten Hag being sacked is very high, and it has been very high since the end of last season. So this has to have been something they've been thinking about for a long time, saying, what if? What do we do here? And I hope they have an answer to that question. So, there is no obvious candidate. There is no Guardiola alternative. And I don't know the answer, to be honest, but I think it'll be a younger manager, because there's a difference between a manager and a coach. And I think being able to manage younger players means you psychologically have to at least understand them. You have to understand them culturally. You have to understand a lot of things that they're experiencing. It's different from my generation above, such as social media and everything else, where some of the more experienced managers don't tolerate that. They have, they're intolerant of those factors. So for me, I think it'll be a younger manager as coach, and someone that any else have identified whose style suits how they want to play. So, and that's encouraging because that's what should be, that's
And,
how a candidate should be selected.
and I would have said Nagelsmann would be that guy, but he's not attainable at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to see who they choose. Could they go left field and go Marco Silva? That would be. He has shown that he is willing to move clubs mid-season. By the way,
Yeah,
he
but
has
Marco
done.
Silva, how does Marco Silva get the respect of players that have won 4 and 5 European Cups?
Yeah,
You're trying to ask these players to do things they don't want to do that they've never done before, and a guy that's never won a trophy in his life is going to tell a 4 or 5 time European Cup winner to do this, do this, do this,
well,
because I know better.
well,
That's where I feel it's a problem where you need managers with track records that command instant trust that says, okay, I'm willing to do this.
yeah, but Ernie, only Slot has only won one Dutch league title, I
Yeah, but
believe.
Slot came into a football club whose standards and consequences were not enforced by a manager; they were enforced by a board. If you did at Liverpool what you did at United, it's Ten Hag wouldn't address that problem; the club would. I mean, if you did what those players did against Spurs at Real Madrid, it wouldn't be Ancelotti in the changing room afterwards. Be Florentino Perez, and you do that again at Real Madrid, you get sacked. You're out of here. No matter what manager you play for. This is not about the manager standards; these are club standards. So Arne Slot walked into a football club, whereas it was very, very clear, power dynamics and structure in the club.
So we just lost Phil. Just as we're about to end the show, we've just lost communication
I
with.
do want I do want to quickly throw Zidane's name out there because there is a link with Jean-Claude Blanc, and I know obviously everyone will talk 3 Champions Leagues, did it with an all-star team, but the second time round, Zidane had to improve tactically, and that he did, and he won a league, and he did win the league with Real Madrid, who, granted, they were still superstars, but they weren't as good as before. So I would be intrigued as if Zidane had come in to see what he would be like, because he'd have to rely more tactically than he did in his first stint, similar to his second stint in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, if he was realistic, he would probably be my first choice. But he hasn't shown any desire to come to England to manage. I don't think he has a. I don't think he's fluent in the English language, and he's given that as a reason as to why he hasn't taken a job in England. But I'd absolutely love to see him in the dugout. Now, Phil, just before we close, I have a question here from Zayad who wants to ask you, when will Ineos uh, when are they planning on taking a majority share of the football club?
Yeah, so this is obviously a difficult question because, from what I understand, it could not be pre-agreed, and have the club's remaining shares continue to be listed, because then it would heavily affect the volatility of the share price. And it would, if you've got a pre-agreed in writing um, agreement to buy the club and remaining shares in 2 years, I believe you have to delist it at that point. So I think they will look for a 3-year transition. And that was what was talked about. So another 2.5 years, any of us are running the football club like they're going to eventually own it outright. And I think that that would be the target, but they can't put it in writing as a guarantee. Otherwise, you have to delist the club.
Yeah, I think it's going to be incremental. We've seen this at other clubs where uh, new consortiums by 25%, then 50%, then 75, and then full control. And I think that's what's going to happen with Ineos. But guys, it's been a pleasure having you both
Thank
on
you,
the show.
lads. Thank you, boys. Thanks, Julio. Thanks, Clay. Thanks, um, uh, Kyle. Appreciate it, man. Thanks. Take care, lads.
Right, Phil. See you later.
See ya. Bye.
Julio, it's great to have you back on.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me back on. I've really enjoyed talking about United. Almost forgot how bad it's been for a little bit.
Yeah, the show was good therapy. Hopefully, we get the result against Villa, but I'm not hopeful of that one. So I'll see you later.
Yeah,